for us to understand. Let me say this. So for this week, this was our main aim of focus to cover this, which is the purchase requisition activities, the purchasing activities, and the goods receipt activities. So far, we've been able to do a good job on that, but on the goods receipt side activities, we've been lacking behind, and the billing invoice activities. And I said we're going to take two uh, scenarios in the procure to pay cycles, a stock scenario, which we are still on, and also a third party direct process. So, and then we're going to look at the procure to pay master data. So since our system is down, we are not able. So we are going to shift focus. I believe by now we all know how to create a purchase requisition and we know the reason why a purchase requisition is created. We all know purchasing activities and we know why a purchase order is created and how to create it in the system. We all know why a goods received activities is done, and at least to a certain point, we all know how to create these goods received in the inbound side of the deliveries. Then, when it comes to the vendor and the billing receipt, invoice receipt activities, regardless, we all know the reason why we create these invoice receipt activities using Miro. We all know the reason why, and we all, at least to some certain point, know how to create it, but we are still going to come back to the goods receipt and the invoice receipt. The only thing we have not ventured into is the procure to pay master data, and we are going to look into that. So they would have completed the procure to pay cycle, and then we would have moved into the database and SAP database. So today, since our system is down, we will still be able to, you know, compromise to venture into database, which is a good thing. But the only thing is we're going to look at the introduction into database, and we're going to look at database tables and basics SQL. So that's what we're going to venture into today, and hopefully, maybe as we go through the class, our SAP server will be up. Then we can look at SAP database, SAP OTC and P2P tables, and we'll look at the SAP table overviews. Okay. So in today's class, we're going to start with ERP system concept. The concept of an ERP system, for us to understand the full functionality of an ERP system when it comes to database. As a business analyst, either ERP business analyst, SAP business analyst, IT business analyst. As a business analyst, it is very important that we understand what a database is and the functionality of a database. But when it comes to the ERP system or any ERP application, the reason why they call them an ERP system is because they use a centralized database. They use a centralized database. In SAP, we have the front end and we have the back end. We always have the front end and we have the back end in any ERP system, and this is applicable to SAP. The front end is always where the business takes place. The back end is mostly where the configurations takes place. where you set up the system, where you write programs, those places are always called the back office. While the front office is the where the end user, where the business happen. In most cases, the back office is where we consultant are normally function from, like doing configurations, fixing things in the ERP system, something that breaks, or enhancing the ERP system. Most of all these things are done from the back office, or we call it the back end. But from the front office, this is where the business happens. This is where the specialists, the end users, the managers, the controllers, this is where they work from. So when it comes to an ERP system, being that an ERP system uses a centralized database, every module in SAP stores their data in this centralized database. And when we're talking about data, we now have an understanding that we have what we call the master data, which really changes, and we also have the transactional data. Both of these data are stored in an ERP or in an SAP centralized database. So when we're talking about modules here, the sales and distribution module, we're talking about the financial module, either the manufacturing module or the inventory modules. This module, in the essence, is like also the back office because these are the suppliers. These are the suppliers who deal with these things. So if we look at the supplier that supplies everything, so you're talking about from the supplier angle, we talk manufacturing. When you manufacture a product, you are a supplier to some kind of a business. When we're talking about inventory, we are talking about keeping this product. When we're talking about sales and distribution, we're talking about selling this product. And all of these things, if we look at them, a centralized ERP system can handle both customers interface and also suppliers interface, which means that even when a business is that uses an ERP system, their ERP system can interact with the customer and their ERP system can interact with the supplier. And every information, both configurations, both uh, the front end processes and the back end processes, everything that happens in an ERP system is stored in the centralized database. And what is the essence of this thing stored in the centralized database? It's for mostly also for what? Corporate reporting. This means that any information you are looking for within the business, you can always access it from the centralized database. Even the human resources management, they can also use an ERP system to perform their human resources. There are some applications like SAPs that have a lot of modules, more than one modules that these applications can handle. All data in and out of that application, they are all stored in a centralized database. Now, as an SAP business analyst, we should understand these informations. And we should also know how to access these database. We should know individual tables or how the ERP system store these informations, either being a master data or being a transactional data. As long as that transaction or that data is being processed by an ERP system, then that information will definitely be available. So taking us forward, let's talk about ERP system here and let's have an understanding. There are more than 140 ERP software vendors in the US and Canada alone. And by estimate, finding each one and conducting basic online research takes upward up to 50 hours. Now, this is for you as a business analyst, just given a background of an ERP system. Yet, getting an accurate information about each vendor capability is one of the first and most important steps towards a successful ERP implementation by any company in the world. Before any company in the world uses an ERP system, there must have been a research being done by the company to make sure that the ERP system they are about to acquire can support their day-to-day businesses. Because that is the reason why not all company uses SAP, because they have to weigh the pros and cons, the cost, the amount, manpower, and how the ERP system is going to support their businesses. They have to be able to do a research on that. And by any company, they will perform cross analysis and investigation of an ERP system that is affordable to them and meets their organizational need. Below are a few lists of ERP vendors. We have 3i, Info, all of these that I just mentioned, that these are just examples of an ERP system that can be used at any capability for any business. It all depends on what the business is looking for or what the business does, and they will be able to look for an ERP system that meets their needs. Cross analysis assessment of these five major ERP vendors offering ERP package to a wide range of Fortune 500 organizations. This assessment depends largely on a com- compactness of the ERP packages, flexible pricing, implementation methodologies, and functionalities. These five vendors provide similar but distinct ERP software package in terms of functionality. We have the BIM, you have Oracle One Word or Enterprise One, JD Edward, which is provided by Oracle Company. You have Oracle 10 and PeopleSoft. You have SAP R3 or SAP Business One. You have Microsoft Corporation Dynamic AS. One thing I want you guys to know that as for this training, as an ERP business analyst or even as an SAP business analyst, when you find yourself or you see any job functionality that is being posted for an ERP business analyst, regardless of the application that the organization is using, as long as it's an ERP system, you should be able to function in that environment. It might take a while for you to integrate your knowledge that you've learned in this training as an SAP business analyst, but you should be able to function in any ERP system environment using or leveraging what you have learned from this training. The above vendors are targeting towards B2B e-commerce. All vendors are offering CRM except JD Edward. For now, who has developed a partnership with the world leader of CRM, Cyber instead. So they are what we call CRM. Now, let me just also break that down because you might understand. So now what we are dealing with is ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning. CRM is Customer Relation Management. These are smaller ERP system that is mostly focused towards customer interface. It's the same logic. It's just that when you go out there, when you start applying for a job and they tell you the person must have an understanding about CRM, it's not really a big deal. It's something that you can just look into and you should be able to support. But most of these things are just customer driven, not B2B like ERP system driven. SAP, PeopleSoft, Oracle, BAN, all have made sustainable headway in developing bundles of enterprise resource planning, global opportunities, and challenges packages and methodologies to reduce implementation cycles, which is crucial for success in that market segment. Noted International Data Corp in recent ERP market reports. So all I'm just trying to make you guys understand is that there are a lot of ERP systems out there. It is not just SAP. It is not just SAP. I myself have worked in JD Edward PeopleSoft environment, which is owned by Oracle. And that is the most important thing, that the reason why in this class we are also looking into the basic SQL database logic, because when I was working as a JD Edward Enterprise One consultant as well, I had to use SQL Pro. The company was using an Oracle database because it belongs to Oracle. I was not an Oracle guy. I don't write SQL in Oracle. But because of my knowledge in Microsoft SQL environment and because of my knowledge in SAP, I was hired for the project. I interviewed for the project and they gave me the project and I came in and I was able to perform. When it comes to the database, Oracle database, they gave me a SQL Studio access to be able to access their Oracle. Some of the statement or some of these queries might be different because it's a different environment. But as long as you know the logic of one system, you can always leverage that understanding or your skill sets to be able to perform that task in other environment. So one important thing also that I want you guys to understand is that when you go to the job market today, after this class, you start looking for a job. It is not just going to be SAP business analyst job that you need to focus on. You apply for SAP business analyst job. You are also able to apply to ERP business analyst job and some other business analyst job as long as they are using an ERP system. All right, so now let's go further and let's talk about what is a database here. What is a database? A structured set of data held in a computer, especially one that is accessible in various ways. One that is accessible in various ways. So every application out there, let me say this. As we're about to start going into the IT industry, I will tell you this. Any front-end applications out there, they use a database. No matter how small that application is, as long as that application deals with data, then there is a database behind it. What is a database management? A database management system, DBMS, is a computer software application that interacts with the user, other applications, and the database itself to capture and analyze this data. A general purpose of DBMS is designed to allow the definition, creation, querying, update, and administrations of database. So there are two things here I want us to understand. A database is like a container, is the environment, regardless of what language you use. A container, an environment where the data, either a master data or a transactional data, is stored. Now, a database management like DBMS, it's an application that you can use to access this container or a database. And that DBMS environment is where we will write our queries, where we can define even a database. The DBMS is what allow the application connections to be able to access data, which I'm going to show now so that we can kind of like understand what I'm talking about. So for the purpose of this class, we are going to be looking into SAP database and how to access tables, data in SAP. But however, also, since we are talking about database, I'm taking us a step further to be able to see what a DBMS looks like, and for us as a business analyst to be able to write queries. So it's very important we're able to write queries. Okay. So this SQL Studio is the DBMS that we're talking about. This SQL Studio is the database management software application. It is the engine. It is an application that is built by Microsoft to be able to access a database, write queries, administer to administer things. So with that DBMS, we can write query, define queries, update, and also administrate a database. So this is a typical DBMS. Yeah, this belongs to Microsoft. Oracle has their own DBMS. Every database application that is out there, they have their own DBMS. Their DBMS is just the management application tool that enables them to go out there to do things. So as a business analyst, we need to understand what a DBMS is, because most of us, the mostly wide used DBMS in the United States is either Microsoft SQL Server or Oracle. There are also some other ones, database DBMS like MySQL. We have Postgres. We have Firebird. There are others, but SQL and Oracle is the most common that we know. Now, once you access a DBMS, as a business analyst, if you find yourself working in any organizations that they use either Microsoft or an Oracle, they are going to provide you a credential for you to be able to access the DBMS environment. So once you're using your credentials, you connect. On a good day, this is the DBMS environment. Once you connect with your credentials, it takes you or it grants you access into the system. Now, once it grants you into the system, then based on the connection, this is the connection right there. You see, this application is connected to my desktop. So based on the application that is connected, so in this way, this will be connected to an ERP system, or it will be connected to an environment. So let's just put it that it is connected to the ERP system that you're going to be working on. It might be an SAP ERP system, it might be an Oracle system, it might be it might even be a web application system. But the connection is going to be there. It is not your responsibility to set it up. It is not your responsibility to know how the connection works and all of that. It is not. That is the job of a database administrator. But once you're giving your credentials, you connect, it will connect you to whatever environment that you need to be connected to. Now, if you take a step further, then you will now see a database container there. So you will be able to see the database container. So every database, so if it's an SAP database that this environment is connected to, you will see the SAP database there. Yes, you can still access this database in an SAP environment for sure. You will be able to access your data in any ERP environment. But also, if you are using a DBMS connection, you will be able to see your database environment there. It might be one database, it might be two. So once you expand under these databases, you'll be able to see all the database in this application environment. For this application environment right now, for mine, I have all these database. I have the system database himself. I have AdventureWorks 2011. I have AdventureWorks DW 2014. I mean, and I also have Doctor Who, and I have World Events. These are the database. So this is the same thing. Once you are given an access to a DBMS, you connect. If there's an SAP table database here, you will also see there whatever name they call it. They might call it an SAP database, they might call it their whatever name, but you will also see the SAP database there. Now, this is how you connect. So the difference here, coming back to our note, is a database is a structured set of data held in a computer, especially one that is accessible in a various way. So this is the database right here. While a DBMS, a database management system application, is a computer software application that interacts with the user other applications and the database itself to capture and analyze data. So inside a DBMS is where you find a database. So this application itself is a Microsoft Word SQL Server, which is a Microsoft DBMS. And inside you find what the databases. So let's go further. Now, when it comes to database development processes, just like I've shown you guys, these database right here that you see here, every database you see in any DBMS environment, they have their process of development. The process development is what we call the modeling. The modeling of a database, we have several types, depending on what type of data is being stored in that database. And when we come to modeling, we have enterprise modeling, we have conceptual data modeling, we have logical data design, we have physical data design and definition, we have data implementation, and we have data maintenance. All of this other side is just the way the DBA works. From these actions here, these are just the job of a DBA, database administrator, how the database is implementation is done. So when you go to a database development process, I'm just kind of like giving you guys an higher level here. These database that we see right here in our own DBMS environment, these database have been implemented. These database, if it's what in a real business world, the database will go through maintenance, physical design and definition, how the structure of the database needs to look like. Then when it comes to modeling, modeling is how the data will interact with each other, or what type of data and how would the data be connected. Our main focus of what we are going to be looking at is going to be the enterprise modeling, because we are dealing with the word enterprise resource planning. So that's the reason why we are looking into this. As a business analyst, most of the database you're going to be dealing with is going to be, or most of the database modeling that you're going to be dealing with is going to be enterprise. That doesn't mean that you cannot go out there and also learn about the conceptual data modeling or the logical data modeling and other modeling that are out there. But when it comes to an enterprise data modeling, the enterprise data modeling creates an integrative connection between data. And that is what we are about to learn here. Now, our introduction into the SQL, which is structured query language, And what we are going to be learning here, we are going to be using our client server environment, which is the Microsoft SQL Server, just to kind of like create the connection. And also, we are going to be looking into data for this week. So we're going to be going into introduction into Microsoft SQL Server, SQL query language, and we are going to be working in our client server environment, and also we are going to be studying what our data. The overview of the work view is going to be work with views. We're going to work with the views and the tables. We are going to write single tables queries, and we're going to establish a referential integrity within the database environment. Structured query language. In today's world, as a business analyst, a lot of us, we go into the job market. We say, oh, we want to become an IT, or some people will say, I want to become a SQL database. No, a lot of people want to be go into the IT industry without understanding what they want to do. But yeah, we'll be able to kind of like narrow down and have a better understanding of why are we learning this? Because as a business analyst, if you know SQL Server, it gives you a broader opportunity. So this is not just looking at SAP tables, but this is also looking at SQL Server to be able to write SQL statement and SQL queries. And with this knowledge, you will be able to leverage it and be able to do things with it. And you will also be able to understand these SAP tables or document structures by the time we venture into it. All right. So structure query language, the standard for relational database management system. Now, let's look at this word again. The first time we talk about DBMS, we said DBMS is a database management system, and we said the environment, the studio that we're working with is the DBMS environment. Inside the DBMS environment is the databases. Now, we look at the database modeling and we talk about enterprise database modeling. When you talk about enterprise data modeling, then we have to talk about relational database management system. So the relational management system is the type of database modeling that has to do with the relationship between either database or between data. The SQL standard purpose. We're going to look at specific syntaxes, systematic for data definitions and manipulation, define data structures. We're going to look at how portability is enabled within the system, specific minimal level one. And we are going to also look at to allow and later growth for enhancement to the system. But all of this, we are not going to cover all these things, but these are the things that can be done within the SQL environment. And the reason I'm just kind of like sharing this with us as a business analyst is because when we decide to also venture into more details with SQL, then we can begin to look into this. But for the purpose of this, because I also teach a SQL class, so that's the reason why I'm just kind of like throwing these to you guys from the higher level. But we're going to move straight into building the query and the main focus that we need to know as a what? As a business analyst. So let's quickly establish a relationship here. Looking at this diagram, let's understand something here. The user, the program, the DBMS, the data. As a business analyst, we have the user. So the user is us. The user is us. Whenever you are trying to pull data from a DBMS, you as a user, you have to write a program, and that program, which we call a SQL query, you have to write it in the DBMS environment. When you write it in the DBMS environment, then the query, what the SQL query does, it extract data from the database. It extract data from the database. However, if you are taking note, please take this note because we are still going to come back to this in the SAP environment. When it comes to IT, information technology environment, we have what we call environment, and this is applicable to any application that or any environment you might find yourself as a business analyst. And this is also applicable in the SQL world. We have three types of environment. We have three types of environment. We have three types of environment in IT or application. This environment also can be called another name. We can also call it landscape. Some people call it environment, some people call it landscape. The first is, we call it the development environment. The development environment, which is abbreviated to what? Dev. You need to know this environment as a business analyst. The development environment, from this context of diagram, we can see here, we call this data dev C. It's very important we know development. For any given application, for any platform, before any application is being used in the IT world, the application needs to be developed. Before any process is being implemented in the IT world, the process needs to be developed. The development environment is an environment where a process or a system is being developed. I will repeat that again. Before any application is being used, before any process is being implemented, there is always a development environment. This environment is where that process is being developed or where the application is being developed, which means that a program is a testing ground, a pre-testing ground, which means you can do your configurations there, check out if the thing works. If it doesn't work, then you apply the fix right there. So you are doing this at the back end where nobody have access to it, but just you, that you are developing that process or whatever you're trying to achieve. This environment is what we call the development environment. In SQL as well, we have development environment. In SAP, we have what we call development environment. When you get a job for the first time in the SAP world or in any application world, and you want to have an understanding, you want to play around the system, The first environment that you will be granted access to is going to be the development environment. The development environment is where you can do your pre-text, play around with data just to see how the system works. The data in that development environment are dummy data or pre-production data. They are just going to be there. The second environment is the QA environment. We'll call it quality assurance environment, which is called the QA. This environment is where after you have developed a process or after you have developed an application or after you have developed some kind of functionalities. The QA environment is where you do the testing, the final testing. Now, in the development environment, you still have to do testing. But the testing you are doing there is a pre-test. Because when we say a pre-test is you are developing, you are testing if that thing works. By the time you finish testing in the development and it works for you, you believe that you have achieved what you have developed. Then that package or that solution is then moved into the quality assurance environment where you can now do a proper testing with more integrative testings, with more data to see how the system behaves. So the aim of quality assurance environment, like the word says, is to assess the quality of the solution or of the process or of the package that you have developed, making sure that you are testing properly. Then the third environment is what we call the production environment, which sometimes we call it prod. The production environment is where the real business works. After you have developed a solution or a process or a package, then you move it to the production environment where the business can start using it. This is the three major environment that we have in the IT when it comes to application functionalities. We are still going to go deeper into this with SAP in the later part of our class because SAP also have this environment. And we are going to be talking about the activities that happens in this environment. But for now, just to give you an high level for we to understand that when it comes to environment in the IT world, we have development environment, we have the QA environment, and we have the prod environment. Prod environment is where the real business happens. QA environment is where we perform our final testing, and development environment is where we develop our solutions and we do a pre-test in that environment. Now, coming back to our SQL environment, in every SQL environment as well, you also have the development environment, you have the production environment. Most of the time when you get a job and you are given access to SQL, that you have to be using SQL for your day-to-day functionality, the first place they're going to give you an environment on is going to be the development environment. Most of the time, the development environment also have the production data. It's just that it is not where the real business is happening because they don't want to interrupt anything. Because if you break anything in the production environment, the system can shut down, the company can shut down for that day, for days, if anything happened in the production environment, because that is where the real business is going on. But if you happen to do anything wrong and develop an environment, it doesn't affect the day-to-day business. So that is the whole essence of this diagram for us to understand that in this environment, as we begin to work, we are going to be working just like, let's say, in a development environment because we don't have a production environment. Understand me? So the goal of this diagram is for us to understand that in SQL, we also have the development environment and we have the production environment. And you as a user, you write a program, which is a SQL queries in the DBMS environment to extract data from the database. All right. So when we're talking about database, we have different SQL environment and what can be done in those SQL environment. Um, we have the catalogs, which are the set of schemas that constitute the descriptions of the database. So we are going to be taking these step by step so that we begin to understand uh, our database environment so that, like I said, Microsoft SQL database environment, DBMS, is different from Oracle DBMS. It might be different from every progress, but they always follow the same concept as long as you know what you're looking for. So let me open one of these database that we're going to be working on. We're going to be looking into AdventureWorks DW. Once you expand the AdventureWorks DW, right here, just like I expand this is the expand button right here. So once you expand it, you will see all the database element. We can see the database diagram. Some database have diagram that have been put in place together by the database administrator just to kind of like tell you the different elements that are in that database and what are the relationship between those elements. We also have tables, we have views, we have synonyms, we have programmability, we have service broker, we have storage, and we have security. Now, all of this, you don't need to bother yourself about it. You don't need to bother yourself about it. But these are the sets. Now, the focus point that we're going to be focused on here is mostly going to be tables and views. Once you get a job in the any ERP environment and you are given access because your job functionality is going to require you using SQL. Not all environment, like in SAP environment. Let me just say this: in SAP environment, you won't need SQL at all. You won't. You won't need SQL. This one that we are doing, you won't need it. But I'm just putting this in part of our training to furthermore broaden our scope of business analysis and be able to give us more opportunity to get a business analytical job out there. You are mostly going to be given a table or a view access. Most of the time when you get a job that your job responsibility will require you to go into the SQL environment, you'll be given access to the view. Most business analysts will have access to the view. Even if you are given access to the tables, it is going to be a display privilege. By now, we all know what a display means. It's going to be a display privilege where you cannot perform any changes. Okay. So our focus is going to be the tables. We are going to be looking at tables in our focus point. Now, when we come here, a set of schemas that constitute description of a database. Schema, the structure that contains the description of the object created by the user, base tables, and views. So we are saying the tables, we have seen the view. Now, let me expand the tables so that we can see. So this is the tables right here. These are all the tables in a database. So let's come here and let's understand one simple thing down here. You have the DBMS, which is the what? The database applications. These are the database applications. Then inside a DBMS, you will find the database. So inside the DBMS, you will find the database. And inside the database, you will find the what? The tables. So this is how it works. Inside the tables, you will find the what? The data, or you can call it information, or you can call it records. Either way. So the DBMS is the database application. Inside the DBMS, you find the database, and inside the database, you find the tables, and inside the tables, you find the data, informations, or record. Now, data, as it is, you can call it data a single entity. A data is a single entity. But by the time you put the data together to make sense, once the data you put together to make sense, then it becomes what? Informations. So they are all single entity. But when you put them together, then it becomes an information. You make sense out of those data. Then when you make sense out of data, by the time you get multiple information, then it becomes a what? A record. So when you have multiple informations, then they become a what? A record. So that is the way these whole thing works. So now when we come into the database environment, so you can see where the journey started. We are in the DBMS environment. Inside the DBMS environment, we have a database. We have these databases, and I expand this database. Once I expand this database, then these are all the database elements that we see here. And now we have tables, and which we are going to be dealing with, because in tables is where the data are stored. So these tables, by the time you expand the tables, you can see this database has a lot of these tables right here. They have these tables right here. Now, if I collapse the tables and if I do view, you will see these are the views that this database has. You can go later do a research because of our time. If I collapse this database, let's look at AdventureWorks database. If I open AdventureWorks database, it's still the same thing. You click on the tables, you will see all those tables right here that the AdventureWorks has. Now, let me quickly explain something here. These are the table names. So let's take an example. Look at all these tables from here. So these are the table from here. So let me quickly explain something so that here's the sample of the database, the tables here in this database. So here's a sample of this. Now, if we look at this table, this example right here says production dot location. If we come to this place talk about the schema. This production here is the schema, because the production here, if you look at it, is the structure that contains the description of the object. So this is a table. This is the table name. This is the table name. And this is the what? The schema name. So this is the description that is telling you, the user, what category or what relational database or relationship this table has. So this is a production schema, which means this table belongs to probably the production department. Maybe they are the manufacturing department. So the production department is the one that owns this table, and the table name is location. Which means if I come here, so all this table belongs to the manufacturing. That's why you see it's a production product, production category, production, product cost history, production, product description, production, product table. So these, the first name that comes before the dot, those are the schema. They represent the structure name, or another word you can call them, you can say they represent the department. The department that owns that table, or the department records or data that that table is storing information for. And the name after the dot is the table name. So that is the way the database works. So it's very important that we clarify that so that we understand, because when we get into any database environment as a business analyst, we should understand that there's a schema. When it comes to table, you have the schema, the table schemas, and you have the table names. So the schemas are the description that tells the user what department or what structure that table belongs to, and then after the table's name. So with the table's name, you'll be able to know what information that table has and what department that table belongs to. One of the most important thing of a schema also is that a table can have the same name. A table can have the same name, but the schema will be different. So that's to tell you that they both have the same name, but the schema, but those tables, they belong to different entity or different department. So we should understand that. Okay. So lastly, before we will take a break, there are at least three major, let's put it that way. There are more languages. There are more languages, but there are three major languages that I put here when it comes to database language. When it comes to database language, we have the data definition language. The data definition language commands that defines the database, including creating, altering, and dropping tables and establishing constraints. Now, these tables that we see here, there are different language queries that we can write as a SQL data analyst or as a business analyst if your job responsibility requires you to pull data, to pull, that's the language there, to pull data from a database or to write a query against the database. Every tables that you're going to be working on, there are three major languages that can impact or that can structure or that you can use to communicate with these tables in the DBMS environment. Any DBMS environment, anyone, any DBMS, either in an Oracle environment, Microsoft SQL environment, MySQL, Postgres, Fireboard, it doesn't really matter. But as long as you are writing a structured query language upon these tables, there are at least three major languages that you will definitely need to write to understand it. But as a business analyst, you don't need to know the three languages. You don't. The first language is the what? The data definition language. The data definition language helps you as a user to be able to what? Create, alter, drop, or establish constraint on a table. Those are the functionality of a data definition language. You use it to define, either to create a table, alter a table, drop a table, or even establish constraint and so on. So if you want to know more about data definition language, you can go out there, you can do it, because I will tell you, people build career also out of being a what? A SQL database or a SQL developer. So people build careers out of that. But as a business analyst, it's just for us to know one of the things on how to actually query it. We don't need to go deeper like people that are making career out of it. But this is a very important key for a business analyst. We also have the data manipulation language commands. These commands that maintain and query a database. And this is the one we are going to be focusing on. Now, we are not going to look at all the query language. We are going to look at the one that is important for us. And as your career builds up, if your career builds up and you find yourself more in these SQL environment, then you can build yourself more on the data manipulation language. Do you really need it? No. But all of these things, as a business analyst, it makes you, it empowers you in any environment that you find yourself. Even this, as I'm teaching this in this class, you might not even use it. You might not even need it. Your job might not even require you. But having this on your resume and being able to talk about it, and if you find yourself in that environment, I tell you, it gives you a better chance to secure a job. Now we also have what data control language, which is the DCL. Commands that control the database, including administering privileges and committing data. These are meant for the data administrators. This is meant for mostly the data developers. Data developers, they will need to learn this language. While an administrator will need to learn this language, and possible they will even know the three major languages. But as a business analyst, our own is to learn the what? The data manipulation language in case you find yourself in a SQL environment. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to take this is the client server environment. Every client means the organization you're working for, they will always have a client environment, and their client environment is the development environment, quality assurance environment, and production environment. So these are the environment you are going to find yourself as a business analyst, either working in a SQL or in an SAP environment. You will always work in this environment. Most of the testing, like I was saying, that once we develop a solution and you are testing as a business analyst, this is where you're going to be testing from. You're going to be testing in the quality or in the QA environment. And sometimes you might also be required to do a pre-analysis of that in the development environment. But when it comes to questions, issues, support, that is going to be coming from what the production environment, because that's the life environment where the business is taking place. So that is the client or server environment.
Well, it's an ERP system too, right?
No, SQL,
Is what?
okay. An ERP system is an application that enables a business to do their day-to-day businesses.
Okay,
But every
okay.
business that is being done in an ERP system, datas are being created, datas are being transported, datas are being used. So those datas that are being created, so take for example, you create a sales order. We created a material. We've created purchase order. We've created delivery. We've created invoice. We've created billing. All those information from the header, item, document number, where do you think they are being stored? Those informations are being stored in a database, an SAP database. They are being stored there. That is the reason why when you go back to take for example, you create a sales order using VA01. You go back to VA03 to display that sales order. And by the time you put the order number, the system is able to display those informations for you. Where do you think the system or the application is pulling that data from? It's pulling it from the SAP database. Now, that SAP database is being stored, though that data is being stored in an SAP database. And that SAP database, where do you think that SAP database is sitting? That SAP database is sitting on a database. So let's quickly take a diagram here so that we can kind of like have a clarity of what this is. So let's take an example here. This is your SAP application. So your SAP application. So let's talk about activities that you create here. Let's talk about example of an activities here. So in these activities, let's talk about all the sales that you do here. So you create, let's say, sales orders. We've created material. So all this information that is being created, deliveries, customer master, all these are data being created here. So this data is being stored in a what? In a database. But what database is this being stored? An SAP application is an ERP application. Every application is sitting on a what? On a what? A database. So this application, which is an SAP, your SAP application has a database that all these informations are stored into. So now, let's say this database information, you can access it through SAP. That is fine. You can access it through SAP. So now let's say there is someone or there's a group of people that does not have access to this database. Or you guys wants to be able to put some records here and the record is too large, you cannot use SAP application to pull that record. Number two. Number three, let's say you guys wants to feed some applications, external applications. You want to feed some external applications. Maybe some kind of web portal. You want to feed those web portal with data coming from the SAP, but you cannot connect it to the SAP application, but you have to connect that external application to the database to pull data. So how are you going to be able to fetch that data? That is where a DBMS application comes in. Now, every SAP application has a database. This application is sitting on a database. And this database provider, there's always a provider. Now, this SAP application has a database, right? Which is fine. But they have their own pre-default database. But this default database, they will always have a provider, which is the DBMS that database has to be sitting in. So providers are people like Oracle, people like Microsoft. Now SAP has their own. SAP has their own. SAP, that's what we call SAP ANA DB. No, not ANA S4, ANA DB. Microsoft DB. We have Oracle DB. So now this information that you are processing right here in this database, so it's sitting on a provider and with DBMS. So one of these provider, let's say we are now using Microsoft SQL as our DBMS. So from these DBMS, we are able to access this database that this SAP application is sitting on. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Any other
Hello?
question? Cap again. So the area of focus that we're going to be looking at, we're going to look at some of the statements or queries in the areas of the DML, which is the data manipulation language implementations, which we're going to look at the load database. We're going to look at statements like insert, update, select, and those are the examples of the statement we're going to look at. So now I'm going to go into my system for us to begin to understand some few things. So now, when we talk about relational database is part of the enterprise modeling where when this database is being created, the database is created in such a way that every tables that we see right here have a relationship with each other. So that is what we call the relational database. You can see, let's say the tables that belongs to the sections of human resources right here. We'll be able to see that those like the 5 tables that are there, at some point in time, these 5 tables that belong to human resources, they have relationship with themselves. And also, you might be surprised that they also have relationship with other tables as well. So this is what we call the relational database modeling or the relational database. In case when you guys hear what the RDBMS, it means the relational database modeling. Looking at our diagram here, I kind of like give an example for us to see what it how it works. This is an example of a tables for enterprise data model segment. We've all understand what we talk about customer. This is a customer, let's say customer tables, the customer places an order. So this is the order table. So once the customer places an order, you have the customer's table that is impacted. You have the ordering table, which is a transactional table that is impacted. And you will have the order lines, which means these lines are where the products are. So which means the product table is also impacted and the order line is impacted, the table line is impacted. At this point in time, you'll be able to see that these four different tables, they will have a relationship with each other. The four table, they will have a relationship with each other, which means you will be able to find a data or the record that belongs to this one order that belongs to a customer. So going forward, this is a relational data modeling, and we can see here. So with the example that I've explained here, let's kind of like go a little bit down before we go into the database environment. Let's say this is the customer table here. The customer table we have things like the customer ID, the customer name, the customer address, the city, the state, and the postal code. Now, this is the order table. The order table, we have things like the order ID, the order table, and we also have the customer field. Now, the order table, we have different fields. These are fields right here that are indicated at the top. So this is the table element. Let's say the customer table has 6 fields. These 6 fields. The order table has 3 fields. The order line has 3 fields, and the product line has what? 4 fields. So looking at this, you can be able to see the relationship that every table will have one unique field that you can build the relationship with. So let's take a look. The customer table has a customer ID. The order table has a customer ID. The customer ID field there is a relationship between the customer and the order table. The order line has an order ID. It has a product ID, and it has an order quantity. Then if you look at the product table right here, it has what? The order ID. So the order ID is the relationship of the product table with the order line table. And you can see the relationship of the order line table with the order table, and the order table has a relationship with the customer table. You can see the fields that is building this relationship between these tables. So this is a logic of the what? The enterprise data modeling, or what we call the relational data modeling. So what is the take here? As a business analyst or as an ERP business analyst, we need to have it at the back of our mind that every single table that we deal with, they are not just going to be a standalone table, but rather these tables will have a relationship with one table or another. We just need to know what we are looking for in the database, and we'll be able to build the connection from there. Okay. All right. So now we are going to go into our force. So let's come into this table in this place. Now, it's very important. The reason why I'm bringing this, I'm just letting you guys know that all this information that is being shared, they are the higher level, and we are trying to make sense of everything as a business analyst. Now, When it comes to a table, we have tables. Every database, like I've expanded here, has a table. If I go to my Doctor Who, they have a tables. Every ERP system has a table. If I come to my Word event, there is a table. Every database has a table, regardless of whatever the DBMS environment it is, regardless of what the ERP system is, they always have a what? A table. Now, what are the table's elements? Let's look at some of the table's element here. Building a table. This is where the functionality comes in. As a business analyst, we need to know the different tables that we can find in an ERP system. Our focus is SAP. So our focus is SAP, which means that we have SAP tables. And we need to know how these SAP tables are, the functions, how they are built. We are not the one that builds them. We are not the one that creates these tables. It is the job of the developers to create them. But however, when we are working with a requirement, you are gathering a requirement from the business that has to require you creating a table. Then we need to be able to know how we are going to write that requirement to create that table. So I'm going to expand one table here. So once you expand a table, every table has an element. Every table has an element in any database and in any applications. So every table, so I'm opening a table here called the Human Resources Department table, which is department table. And these are all the elements in this table. The focus of this element that we will need to look at here is only to look at the columns. Every table has a column. That is what we want to focus in. We're not going to focus on keys. Yeah, we're going to look at keys, but we're not going to focus on constraint, triggers, index, because we are not a SQL data analyst. So we're just looking at from the SQL business analyst point. So we're going to be focusing on keys and columns when it comes to table. That is what we are going to be focusing on. So I'm going to expand the column for us to see. So when you expand the column, this table has four columns. Either we call it columns or we call it field. Either way, it's like an Excel. You have columns in an Excel, column A, column B, column D. And you can also name your columns. So this is also applicable in the database tables. So you have four columns in this table here. You have column 1. You have this column, this column, this column, this column. Every column has what we call its own strings that is being created. So let's come back to our slides to have some understanding here. Data types, that is the focus here. Data types, that is what I want to talk about here. There are several data types that are stored in a table. When data are stored in a table, the type of data that is stored in that table or in every fields, there are different types. And you have to name the type of data that is going to be stored in individual fields in a table. Take, for example, we're also going to look at this in SAP, but we are looking at this from the database angle. We are going to take two examples. Example 1, this is human resources. So let's take this human resources table. Let me expand the key so that I can be able to create, to explain more further. So I'm going to take this table. I'm going to put it here so that we can have an understanding. And I'm going to go back to the top here, to our slide. And I'm going to take the screenshot and come here. Okay. All right. Let's look at this human resources table. This is the table. The table has a column. It has a column. Let's bring this here. This is a table. This is a table. This is a table. So we are looking at two examples here. So, and this is a table. This table has how many columns? It has 5 columns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the customer table has 6 columns of fields. The order table has 1, 2, 3. The order line has 1, 2, 3. And the product table has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns. Same thing with these human resources has 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. For every column, please hold on. For every column in this table, before you can store any data in this table, the data types has to be defined. The data types has to be defined. This is applicable even when you're working with SAP tables or any application tables. The data types has to be defined. Let's take the first example. The human resources is going to be our guide here. The human resources table has these 4 columns: department ID, name, group name, and modified date. Customer table has customer ID, customer name, customer address, city, state, and postal code. Department ID here, we can see something here that says PK. PK means primary key. The primary key means that that is the identifier for this table. That is the key table. That is the field that has the relationship in that table. That is what we call primary key. Whenever you have primary key, it means that that is the field that has the relationship between any table, or that is the identifier to that table. In this context of customer table, the primary key here is the customer ID, because that is the unique. And this field has to be unique. That means there will not be any duplicate record in that field. There will not be any duplicate record that will exist in that field. It is a unique field that will have unique value. Now, when this table is being created, we are not the one responsible. Business analysts are not the one responsible to create this table. It is the job of the administrator or developers to create. But in most ERP system, this table, they will come as default. And even if the developers have to create, they will create this table, but it is not our responsibility to create them. However, as a business analyst, if you are assigned that requirement to work with the developers to create this table, you are the one as a business analyst that will gather the requirement from the business. When you are writing your spec or your document that you are going to send to the developer on the tables they have to create, you have to be the one that will have to tell them what field is going to be the primary key or the unique identifier on that table. Because you are the one that gathers the requirement from the business. So it is very important. I'm not saying you are going to find yourself in a project like this, but you can also find yourself. So we need to understand what the primary key is, that it is a unique identifier field on that table and it cannot have a duplicate record. So the unique identifier on the order table is the order ID. On the order line is the order ID. And on the product line is the product ID. Those are the unique identifier on that table, and they will never have a duplicate record. Now, data types going forward, we also have, you have to identify, or the developer have to say, what type of data can this field accept? Now, they've identified the unique. Now, what type of data can this field accept? We have several data types. When it comes to data types, we have numeric, we have date, we have strings, data types. Now, we have string types, we have numeric types, we have data types. Okay, I only mentioned 3 here. In the string data types, there are code names that they use in representing these data types. So under strings, we have the char, we have varchar, we have long. There are a lot, but I just mentioned 3 here. Fixed length character data, n character maximum, all of this is just talks. But what I need you to guys to understand is when it comes to string types, and we're going to go further, I'm going to explain further. We have the char, we have the varchar, we have the long. When it comes to numeric, these are numbers. If this field is going to only accept numbers, the data type that can be used can be either numbers, integer, float. We have small int, big int, and so on. When it comes to date and time too, you will need to be able, the developer will also identify if this field is a date field. Coming back here, you can see an example of this department ID. The data type here is a numeric, and that is why you have small int. So it's telling this table saying that this field, department ID, you are the unique identifier. At the same time, you can only accept small integers, small int. Name, it comes here to say name field. The name field is a name. It's just a field. You just put it as a name. He said it can only accept n voucher data type. So this data type belongs to the strings. Belongs to the what? The string types of data, and it says you have to be N voucher. You can see we put here voucher, but you also have N voucher. So you say this is N voucher. The group name, he also put it, he said this is a name and it can only accept a string types, which is N voucher. Now we can see modify date field. He put here, he says what the data type has to be a date time, which means this field can only accept date time field. If we look at these other tables are just image because we didn't get it, get the type of strings or data types that they have. But I am assuming that the customer field, this will be probably a numeric data type. This will be what? A string data type. This will be a N voucher, which is going to be a string data type. This is going to be a string data type. This is going to be a string data type. And this, because this is a number, this is going to be what? A numeric data type. And when we're talking about the numeric data type, then you have to now apply the classification. Is it going to be an N voucher, a char, an integer, a small int, a big int? All of these things is applicable. In SAP, it's the same thing. When we are creating a custom table in SAP as a business analyst, when we are writing the spec and sending it to the developers, we also have to identify the table name, how many fields will that table have, and what data type that field is going to be. Let's go back into the DBMS and let's look at other tables just to kind of like understand. So let me open another table here. Let me open like personal address. I open the column. All right. Let me take this one more example and we will go from there. Let me take this one more example so that we can have a clear understanding. Same thing is applicable to this table name here. Person's address, the address table. On this, we can see this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 fields or columns. The keys, it has 1, 2 keys here. This table only have 1 key, and I'm going to explain this. The address ID field on this table, we can see the data type here is what? Int, integer. On the address line, we can see N voucher. That is the data type. On the address line 2 is N voucher. The city, so the reason I picked this, look at it, you can see the same similarity. City is what? N voucher. State is an what? Integer. Postcode is an N voucher type. Special location, you can also see another one is a what? Geography, but that is not a data type, that is just a naming. Role is a unique identifier, and modification date is a what? Date time. Is a what? Date time. Now, I'm going to go a step further. At the front of these data types, we will see a number being put there. Now, what I'm showing you guys is a technical. We are looking at the technical side now for us just to understand. And I'll keep repeating this. We are not the one creating this table. It's the developers. But they can also ask us questions. You might send the table name, the field's name, the data tag to the developer. The developer can come back to you and say, hey, you said your address line is n voucher. Do you by any chance have any idea how many fields or how many character can this field accept? If you want to put a restriction on a field, which most of all this field will have, that this is the amount of character they can accept. That is why you see the 60 here. So it's telling, say that on this address line column or field, it is an n voucher data type and it can only accept 60 characters. If you put any character that is 61, it's going to cut off the last one. It can only accept 60 characters. Line address 2 can only accept 60 characters. You can see the city can only accept 30 characters. When we look at postal code can only accept 15 characters. So the developers, they have to specify the amount of characters you can put. This is also applicable in the SAP system. When we are creating material, when we are creating customer, those numbers, the material name, when we put our material descriptions, those fields that we type those things into, behind the scene in the table structure, those fields also have their data types and the amount of character that they can accept. The essence of this is, as a business analyst, if you find yourself in a project where at the end of the day, we are going to do one project on this, where you will have to work with the developer to create a table for some certain functionalities. You might be required to give the developer the functionalities of what that table is going to represent. And these are the elements of tables. Lastly, I'm going to quickly come to these keys, just for us to understand. I said the unique identifier on this table, the address ID will always be the primary key, which is PK. PK means primary key. FK means foreign key. A table could have a foreign key. Example here. If we look at this table here, 1 order table, 2 order line table. The order line, the order table has its own PK, which is the order ID. Then you then have the relationship table here, which is the customer ID, which is the customer PK field, but it has it on the what order line ID. This makes this field to become a what? FK, a foreign key. The simple definition of a foreign key is whenever a field that is a primary key on another field exists in another table, that field will become a foreign key, which means you are in a foreign land. The same thing on this order line. The order line has its own unique PK order, but you can see the product ID, which is a primary key on the product table, exists in the order line table. It now makes this field an FK, a foreign key. It's the same thing here. This table is telling us that though this table has a primary key, which is primary key is what the address ID, which you see right here, and it's telling us that this same field exists in another table called the province state table. It means it exists in another table called the province state table. If you look at this F key address province state, this field state ID, you can see it right here. That is the reason why it's FK. That on this table, this field that is here is actually in this table. On this table, this is a primary key. But because he exists on this table, it becomes a what? A foreign key. And you can then use this field to build a relationship between this table and this table. So which means this state province, it's a relationship. It has a relationship with person address in the database. So I'm going to pause here and I'm going to ask any question or if we are clear. We've been looking at tables. Now, the first instance in an earlier part of this, when we're talking about this structure here, we talk about the database, that the SAP application is sitting on a database, that every ERP application will be sitting on a database, regardless of its provider. SAP has its own database, Oracle, Microsoft, it all depends. Now, how do you find the database, this ERP or any ERP system or any SAP system you find yourself? How do you know what database they're sitting on? At the top here, you will see a menu that says system. Once you see this system at this top here, open it. Go all the way down to the status in the SAP system. I'm going to click on the status. When I click on the status, let's wait for the system. Now we have this pop-up. This pop-up here, if you look at this section, what do you see here? Database data. The database system that this SAP is sitting on is the Microsoft SQL Server. It's sitting on the Microsoft SQL Server, and which is the one that I've been showing us right here. It's sitting on the Microsoft SQL Server. Now, that is step one. We've seen the Microsoft SQL Server that is sitting on. Number two, in our last class, I gave us an assignment and I said, you guys should go do a research and tell me how many OTC tables you can find master data OTC table. So can someone tell me one table here that we can look at? Someone, quick, quick. I'm waiting. Can someone tell me one table that we can look at from your assignment or from your order to cash flow? There was a table there, the document structure. Or can I ask, okay, what table can you find material master? What table? Or what is the table name for the sales order header? Sales order header table. What is the table name? Sales order header table. I am asking. So let's look at VBAC. To access SAP tables from the back end, we use SC transaction SC16N to access. You can use SC16 or you can use SC16N to access the table. So when we access, it takes you to the back end where you can display a table. Now, please let us understand, I'm trying to build the concept between SAP database with our Microsoft SQL database. We've established the fact that these IDs, this training system is sitting on the Microsoft SQL database. Now, when you put your table name here, once you access the transaction code SC16, you put your table name here. And the table name we want to look at now is VBAC, which is the sales order header table. If I come here and put VBAC, it populates all the fields on VBAC inside SAP now. It populates all the fields in VBAC. There are more. That is the reason why when you look at this, there's a scroll bar here, right here. So if I scroll it down, you will see that there are a lot of fields or column in the VBAC table. All the way down, you have a lot. All the way down. Now, if I scroll back up, this is the field name, which is the column name. And this is the technical name in SAP. The English and the technical name. You have the field name, which is the label, and you have the technical name. In this, it's just like this. When we come here, it's the same thing I'm showing us right here. The field names are this, and they also at the back end, they use it to identify the technical names that you see right here. Now, we are looking at VBAC. In VBAC, you can see one of the field name you will find here in the VBAC is sales order document created on, created by. So now I'm going to take my ID. So this is my ID. Now I want to pull out all the sales order that I have created. So I am using my created by name to look for all my sales order. The maximum int that this table can pull is 500 right now. I'm saying your maximum int can only be 500. I am pulling record from VBAC table, which is the sales order header table. And I'm looking for all the sales order that this user name or created by person as what created. Then now I'm going to execute this event, when I execute, in the system, I have created my ID has created 22. There's a 21 count. I've created 21 transactions that are related to sales order in VBAC. So my document type is OR. You can see the field name. I can see OR, and I've created IN, and you can see QT right here. So these are all my sales order document numbers that I've created. The time, the date that they were created, the time, the person that creates it. This is from and to the ones that have validity date, and you can see other element such as net value, the currency, the sales organization, distribution channel division. This is what you get in the table, in the sales header table VBAC. Now, these are the records. All these are the records, the data. Our focus point coming back here is the table structure. Before this table that we're seeing VBAC start storing data in this table, this table was created with an element of different data types that they have to accept. I'm going to take this table now, VBAC. I'm going to go to a new transaction. This transaction, you guys as a business analyst will never have access to it. You will never have access to it. However, I just want to show you guys, because as a business analyst, you might find yourself in a project where the project will require you guys to create a custom table. VBAC is a predefined SAP table. SAP has already created the table, so the business doesn't need to create a table. But there are some functionalities or some project where a new table has to be created. And if you are tasked with that to create a new table, which means when I mean create the new tables, you are not creating it, it's the developers that create it. But you are tasked with the functionality to gather the requirement and work with the developer for them to create it. Now I'm going to go to SC11. Like I said, you will never have access to this transaction. This transaction is for the developers. This transaction is called SC11. It is only meant to be used by the developers. If you just want to use it, I just want to use it to be able to build the relationship of what we are talking about here in SAP. Now, this is my table, the database table. You can see what SAP says. This is the database table, and this is my table name. And what I'm going to do, you see this, you see the data type here, but I'm just going to click display. The database table, you can see my radio button is checked, and this is my table name, and this is my display. So I'm going to display this table. Okay. Displaying this table is the same thing that I was trying to also explain to you guys. Watch. The short description, which is the field name, this is the field name, says document can only accept 10 characters, can only accept 10 characters. And the data type is a char, and that's it. You can look, we can see another one here. So let's look at this. So this is sales document. It can only accept 10 character and the data type is char. Let's look at another category here. Entry time can only accept 6 characters and it can only accept data type times. So let's look at warranty date. So we have, let's look at a quotation and inquiry validity, valid from date that we normally put. It can only accept 8 characters and it can only accept a date, which is a date. That's what SAP call it, a date time field. It's the same thing that I'm trying to explain to you guys here, that every ERP system is sitting on a database. When these tables are being created, they have table element, which means the fields, which are the columns. Within the columns, individual fields, their element has to be determined what type of data types and how many characters they can accept. Why am I explaining this? Is because if you find yourself in a project as a business analyst that you have to work with the developers to create a custom table, the developers, they don't understand the business. You are the one who's going to gather the requirement and you are the one who's going to write the spec to the developer. And you are the one who's going to give them the table name, the fields, and possibly you are going to be the one to tell them the data type that this field has to accept and possibly the character length that those field has to accept. You can find yourself in a project like that. Coming back, this table, we are accessing this table in the SAP system. Majority of your work, when you are working in an SAP environment, this you are going to be making use of SE16 most of the time to look at the table records. To look at the table records. But sometimes you are looking for a job. If you find yourself in an ERP environment that is not SAP based, I have worked in that environment. They will give you access to what their DBS environment. Once they give you access to their DBS environment, all these tables you see here in an SAP, so whatever the ERP system uses, all these tables will be accessible also from their DBMS. Even in SAP, we have just looked at SAP and we have just looked at what the database this SAP is sitting on. This SAP ID system is sitting on the Microsoft SQL Server database. I bet you if the company that is giving us access to this database, if they give us access to this database, if they give us access to this database, we will see all the data, all these tables in this ID system will be, we will be able to access it from a DBMS environment. And this is how the relationship between these two systems works. But why are we teaching Microsoft SQL Server here? Why are we talking about SQL here? SQL is a different monster on its own. And as a business analyst, I will keep saying it, it gives you an edge in the job market as a business analyst. This DBMS environment, after we've learned the SQL, we will still come back to the SAP tables to look at the SAP tables element and how we can also work with SAP table as a what? As a business analyst. So coming back to the DBMS, which is the database environment, now we've been able to establish our database, our tables in our database, and looking at the tables in our database, we've been able to establish what? Our fields, and we've been able to establish what? Our columns. And our columns and the data element. And it's the same thing with SAP. The says order header table VBAC, we are displaying the table element here, and we can see the different fields that this table has. So looking at this table, the VBAC table alone has 156 fields. This table VBAC has 156 columns of fields, and individual fields, they have their own element that is defined. The data type, the length of character they can accept, and the descriptions. And this is also applicable to the SQL environment. If I open the SQL query, which we're about to start to learn how to create our own query. If I open the SQL environment now, I take the persons table. We are going to start learning this, so just watch what I'm doing for now. I take the SQL table and I write my SQL statement saying select all from this table, and I execute this query. I will see all the records that is in this persons table. These are all the records that is in this persons table that we've been looking at. So you can see the address field here. If we look at the address field, it has a what? Numbers. The address line has address, the city name, the postal, the province, the postal code, the special location, the news, and the date time. And all of these are the records in these tables. But before these data can be stored in these tables and in these fields, the developers, they have to define the data element, and that is the point of understanding the data types. So in SQL or in a database, when it comes to the tables, when the table is concerned and the fields or columns are concerned, we have different string data types. We have the string types, the numeric types, the date line types in this. And now we are going to go in and start looking into our queries for data manipulations and things we just need to know from the SQL side before we refer back to the SAP system. So I'm going to pause here and I'm going to ask if anybody has any question. Manipulation language. These are the quick statements that we're going to look at. We're going to be looking at the clauses used for query on a single or multiple tables. We're going to look at clauses of the select statement. We're going to look at select statement to see the list of column or to retrieve data from a table. That is used be returned from the query. We're going to look at the from, what the from does to indicate the tables. We're going to look at the where, indicating the conditions under which the row will be included in the result. We're going to look at some questions, some statement with a group by, indicating colors to group the result. And we're going to look at having, possibly, or we're going to look at order by. We're going to look at, maybe as time allows, we're going to look at join statements to be able to join multiple tables together, and just to kind of like for our own understanding. And we're going to be looking at operators, just to be able to look at the different operators that can be used in your query. There are a lot, but like I said, this query is just like a guide. We are just going to be guiding us so that tomorrow, if you start to use a SQL environment, you can then take your skill further, but at least you have a guide of what to do. So the first statement in the SQL environment is the select statement. The select statement is the first statement that any SQL individual will need to learn. The SQL statement enables you to receive data from a table. So the first thing you need to understand here is that the query, you have to click on this button to be able to open the query section. So the query section is this right here. So once you click on the button, it's going to open this section right here for you, which is your query section. We call it the query environment in the SQL environment. So once you click on the query, then it will open that. So the next thing is you have to select the database environment that you are going to be working on. So like for me, I have 5 database. So you have to select the exact database environment that you want to be querying, because if you select the wrong database and you query it, you're not going to find any result match. So you have to select your stuff. So the first statement is we are going to say select. So you write it. The reason why I love SQL is it's in English. So once you know the English and you know your syntaxes, your statement, then you'll be able to work with it. So select all from. All is a symbol of the asterisk. That is what we use as all. So the word all, which is the ALL, but we use the asterisk sign in the database environment. Select all from. Then you have your schema and table. It has to be both together. So now naturally what you just have to do is you can just select it and drag and drop your tables in your query section. Then once you've written that select all from this table, you are telling the DBMS engine, or you are telling the application that go and select all the data from the person's address table. So once you write that statement, then you have to highlight. You have to highlight. That means you have to highlight. When I mean highlight, you have to highlight the set of query that you want to execute. The reason why you have to highlight is this is a single statement query, but as a developer, if we are not a developer, but I have worked as an SQL data analyst, and I my skill set was up to the development level. So as a developer, sometimes you have multiple set of data or set of queries that you are writing, and you don't want to execute everything because they have different functionality. So highlighting your query, you are telling the system that this is the set of query I want you to execute. So once you highlight the query just like I've highlighted, then you then click on the execute button. The execute button in the SQL environment is this. So once you execute, that execute means that you are triggering this query to run. And this query, the system is going to go into this table to fetch all the data in that table, and you will have it displayed at your result set. So this is the result set. This section right here all the way down is the result set. This is where your result is displayed. And at this top here is your query environment. So this is the SQL environment, the way it works, and this is what you have to know for now. You are not a developer or a DBA that you're going to be worried about every other thing. So our first statement here that any given person from the basic needs to learn is the select statement. The select statement in the database world enables you to select a record or display records from the table. So select all from my person's table. So this is me selecting my record. Now, I'm also going to talk about commenting. So when you will have a dash dash like this is a comment, and you can see the colors. So so you can see the color. So this is commenting in SQL database. So when you have, there are two types of comment. You also have another comment style, which can be this, which is the second type of comment. All right. So this is a two style of comment. Commenting means that in every, I'm not going to go deeper into this because we are not a developer and we are not aspiring to become a developer or a database administrator. But however, commenting means that every developer that writes a query, or even you as a business analyst, if you find yourself in an environment where you are using a Microsoft DBMS engine and you write a query, but you want to be able to know what the query means or why you wrote the query or what is the functionality of that query, you can always put a comment in it. So the system, once you put a dash dash, just hold on. Let me. So when it comes to commenting, we have the two types of comment. You can see the one with a straight two dash. You just use dash dash. The commenting can only be used in a straight line. In a straight line. But this other comment has an open and close, which means that when you use this type of comment, you will normally use this type of comment if the comment is long and you want to break the comment into different sections. So you use open and close so that you are telling the system that this is the beginning of your comment and this other section is the ending of your comment. So if I take the ending part of this comment out, you will see that my query will become a comment. So that is the reason why you always have to close it if you are using this type. So now the essence of a comment is that once I execute everything together, it still give me the same result because the system does not see this as a query, but rather it sees as a comment. If I remove this comment and I open this, you can see it changes things. The system will start seeing this as a statement because this statement does exist in the system and it looks at it as a statement. So if I select everything and I try to execute, it's going to give me an error because it says that I don't understand what you're trying to achieve here. But we are going to come back here and we're going to say this is a comment. We open it and we are closing the comment. And now if I execute back, the system says, okay, that is a comment. I just have to ignore and I just have to go to my statement. So this is the first thing I think every uh, business analyst or data analyst needs to learn. Commenting, select statement, and select from. All right. So that is one. So let's come back here and look at another thing we're going to look at here is the where clause. So we're going to be looking at where, how to use where. So we've established the select, we've established the from. So you always have to indicate the from. The from means what table you are pulling your record from, and select means where what statement are you trying to execute. So now where it enables you to fulfill a condition which a row will be included in the result set. So now let's come back here into our SQL database. When we come here and we are trying to, we have in this table right here, the persons table. In the persons table, we have we have 19,614 records. Is the same thing if we come to SAP in our table. If I green arrow back in our table in SAP, I just want to kind of like be building relationship of these things so that we all have an understanding of what is going on. If we come back here in our table, if I remove my created by information and I remove the maximum it, which is 500, let me remove that. And now this is just the VBAC table. If you're on the VBAC table right here, which is the VBAC, the header table, now the numbers of entries, if you click on the button on the numbers of entries, if I click on it, it's going to tell me the numbers of entries that is on the VBAC table. If the VBAC table has a 1 million record, it will tell me. We normally use this when we are doing validation or we are working on a validation project or migration project. If we are working on a migration project, we as a consultant, when we're working on migration project and we want to know how many counts in the table in the production before we migrate data, these tools comes handy for us to be able to make use of to see how many records do we have in a table before we migrate that table. Now, in this table, in this VBAC, in this training table, we have a total of 11,000. We have a total of 11,916 records. That is what we have here. 9,916 record. You can see that is what entries that was found. It's the same thing when we come to a database. In a database, when we come to a database, right here, we are executing everything. So we are not able, so the system tells us the amount of records that we have in this table. Now, if I go back to the SAP system and I execute this transaction on this table, without specifying an int of maximum int, and I'm running it wide open, this query, this, if I execute it, is going to try to pull all the 11,916 records. It's going to try and pull it, all the 916,000 records. However, let's come back here to the same table, SC16N. That's how we access the table in SAP. Now, if I come back to the same VBAC and I remove my 500 int, and now in the first instance, I executed with my created by ID. What my created by ID does is I'm giving the database a condition, telling the database that I only want a record that belongs to this user ID. It's a condition. So I'm telling that I say, okay, whenever I execute it in the back end, what I'm actually telling, so you can see when I run it wide open, it went and brought all the 9,000. It went and brought all the 11,916 record on this table. So you are going to be scrolling and try to look for your own data. So if I want to look for the sales order that was created by my user ID, that means I have to scroll through 11,916 record. Whereas I can give the query a condition right here by maintaining my user ID here. And I'm saying indirectly that go and select all the sales order that this user ID have created. And when I execute, the system goes forth and give me what 21 record of the sales orders that I have created. So what it's doing now is it goes in and say, okay, based on the user ID you gave me, I found that this user ID have only created 16 record on this table for this user ID. And that is the reason why you see all the 16 has this user credentials. This is the same logic when we come to our SQL statement in this regards and where we are using the where clause. By the time we are using the where clause, is the same condition that we are given, that we are saying that, look, I have this X amount of record in my data, in my table, but I want you to go and give me this exact information. So let's practicalize that in the SQL environment. In the SQL environment, I have already established the fact that we have what, 19,614 records in these tables. Now, what am I looking for? We have user ID. So let's say, take for example, I want to look for every city. So we have a city. So I want to look for how many address do we have in the Dallas city. I want to see how many record we have in the Dallas city. So how will I be able to do that? I'm going to come here and I'm going to say, select all from this table. And I'm going to say where city, which is the field name, city equals, and I'm going to come here and I'm going to put Dallas. So I'm going to come here, I'm going to say where city equals Dallas. Now, this is the where clause. The where clause, you cannot use the where clause without the field name. So this is the where clause statement with the field name where you are directing that functionality to, and then you have to put your strings name. Now, the string, for you to tell the system is a string, you have to put these two quotes here. And that's the reason why the system makes it red, because it sees that it is a string, a quote. Now, when we talk about strings, we are talking about string data type. So we are saying that this field is a string data type field. However, the strings itself that we are looking for is dollars. So just like what we did in SAP, where we are looking for the exact information, we said our user ID, because we are referencing the created by field and we're putting our user ID, is the same thing we've just done here in the SQL database. We are selecting from the person's address table where the city equals Dallas. If I highlight and execute this, then now it gives us what? 7 rows or 7 records of a person's address where we have what? Dallas. So we only have 7 record of people that their city is Dallas. So this is how we use the where clause with the select statement. Like I said, the language we are going to be learning as a business analyst is the data manipulation language. Manipulation, how do we manipulate the table, the data to get the result that we are looking for. So it's the same logic. Either you're using an SAP tables to pull data, is the same logic we're going to be using in the SQL environment, and I'll keep repeating it again. The reason why we are doing this is, as a business analyst, you can find yourself in a project or in an environment where you will be required to use a SQL environment. All right. So another functionality that we can also use in data manipulation is the group by. But we are going to skip the group by for now because the group by comes with multiple tables. So we are not going to use it right now, or we're not going to use that syntax because I want you guys to kind of like understand the different things. Okay, order by. So let's go to order by. But in the scheme of things, this is how the query needs to be arranged. So so if I come here, if we come to having, I can say, um, so take for example, if I say select all from this person table where city equals dollars, and we can then say having the address, everything has to be within the table. The column that you have to be using or the field you have to be using has to be within your table. Right. If I say having the field address now equals having the field address is the fact that you are narrowing down your search criteria. If I say having let me say PO box, so let's put PO right there, P dot O, and let's see if this works. So we put having PO. So if we execute this, let's see what happens. It says the criteria because we have to pass it a group by with a group by. So that's the reason why the clause. So we are going to skip this section, these two, and we are going to come back to it for now for the example because I don't want us to go overboard. Let's use the order by. Order by is a way that you can, so I'm going to comment this out. Order by is a way where you can then order your result in an ascending or descending mode. So let me execute this query again. All right. Now, if I come to the SAP system, I come here in the SAP system. Now I have my 21 records. All of this is, so now let's look at the created date. So this date that they were created is different. So if I want to order the created date ascending, by ascending or descending order. So I will use this button. So this is the ascending and descending order. So descending means arrange this result from the bottom. Ascending means arrange this result from the top. So if I click on the descending and let's see what happens. You have to select the field, select it, then click on the descending order. So we can see from the ordering, so from the bottom, you can see what happens. It takes all the sales document that was created from the 29th, then all the way to the 10th. So 29 means from the back to the forward. If we select the same field back again, and now let's select the created by field. Once you select it, highlights everything. Then if we click on the ascending button, it will rearrange it from the ascending part of it. And you can see from the 10th, which is from the beginning, the 10th, all the way to the 29th. So we can see these documents were created on the 10th. This was created on the 11th, on the 17th, 21, 25th. So on the 25th, we have 3 documents that were created. So this is how we sort by ascending or descending order. And this is also applicable to this. If I click on the net value fields, so if I want to do from the smallest amount, so let's say I want to do from the smallest amount to the biggest amount. Once I click on the ascending order, it's going to take this dollar value amount from the smallest to the biggest, regardless of when they were created. So we can also see the changes that happens in this environment right here. So we have the information being sorted from the smallest value to the biggest value, sorting with the what? The net value all the way to this. So it's the same thing that the functionality of this order by does in the SQL environment. So if I come here and if I say, okay, what can we order? So let's order our address field, our address ID from ascending order from the smallest to the biggest. We can come here and we can say select all from the persons table where the city is Dallas, and we can say order by the address ID and in ascending order. So this is a statement for ascending, and if I select this and if I execute, and we will see from 25 all the way to 58. And if I want to do it in a descending order, all I have to do, I copy this query, the same query, I put it down here, and I change the ascending of these to what? Descending order. If I change it to descending order and I select all of these and I execute, we will see that it takes it from the biggest to the smallest. So this is how you use the order by statement in the SQL environment. So I'm just trying to make sure that we all understand when I do it in the SQL environment, I also show us the impact on how it can be done in the SAP environment from the table side. All right. So
So, Mr. Byrne,
yes, question.
how do we get to know these codes to use? This ascend that
Okay. So
you
how do we know to use them is what I'm teaching you now. So these are the statements that you will need to understand. You will need to use them, practice, and know them. So I went through a training that before I get to know these statements. So you just need to know the right statement to use. Now,
do
when
you have
you
like a database of these codes for this sequel that we need to master?
okay, let me put it this way. Let me put it this way. If I recall, in one of our class, Kevin said something. He said, whatever I teach here is what you guys should practice for now. Because if I tell you you have database, yes, there are a lot of database, there are a lot of resources that you can go online and look for. But when you start looking for, you are going to miss the whole scope of everything because there are a lot of informations out there. What I'm teaching right now is the best approach for what you need to start with from the base level. So you watch this video back, use a statement, practice it. When you master these things and you are able to use it in different scenarios, then going out there and looking for other statements that you are going to practice with is going to be more efficient and you're going to understand what you're doing rather than just going out there just to try to look for something and you don't know how it works. Does that make sense? I
Okay.
have I have a workbook that I created in my SQL training class and I can share some part of that with you guys. But I want to explain this. The scope is the scope of this training is SAP Business Analyst. But as a business analyst taken out of SAP, when we get ourselves into an ERP analyst functionality or even any business analyst functionality, these can come handy. But the part that can come handy is the one that I'm teaching right now. So even if I send a workbook of SQL class to you, is for you to go further down the line. But does that really benefit you in the long run? Yes, but will you use everything? I presume no, because the SQL data analyst training workbook that I have that I use is for people that want to venture into SQL data analyst career part. So I went into more details. But right now, the information as a SAP business analyst is too much enough that you want to overstretch yourself. So make use of this statement that I'm using, know how to use it, know why you are using it, know the reason why, and that is the most important thing. Select statement is to select record from a table, and you have to put it in this context. Select all from this table. Where is to then further give a condition of the exact field you want to select data from. And the equals to is an operator that you are saying equals to this string, and it will be able to pull it out for you. Order by is in case you want to order things either in an ascending order or in a descending order. Okay. All right. Is that